2006, the world was introduced to what would be the first in a long-running series from Bravo. Titled The Real Housewives of Orange County, the show documented the lifestyles of 5 lavish women living in a suburb in California. We were given an insight to the women's personal lives as well as the way they would maneuver within the friendship group. This fly-on-the-wall style show introduced us to 5 women who would become the foundation of Bravo's magnum opus. Throughout the show's run, we've seen iconic feuds and fascinating personal storylines, all of which have allowed The Real Housewives to firmly cement itself as reality royalty, giving us some of the most entertaining moments from reality TV, which has enabled the franchise to earn its place in pop culture history. We've seen the likes of Nene Leakes and Teresa Giudice to go on to become household names, while others such as Candy Burris and Kyle Richards have used the show as a platform to reboot their careers, giving them a second chance of relevancy. Over the years, we've seen them grow from one show to an entire franchise that's branched out to 11 American and over 20 international installments. With the most current Bravo-based show, The Real Housewives of Dubai, premiering in 2022, it's clear that the franchise has no intention of slowing down in its quest for reality TV domination. Because of this, I thought it would be fun to dive into the past and explore how The Real Housewives got its start, taking a look behind the scenes and looking into the journey that the show would take before debuting on our screens. So let's explore the origins of The Real Housewives and how this slice of life show would take on a life of its own and become a global phenomenon, attracting millions of regular viewers and dominating the world of reality TV for almost 2 decades. The concept of the show came together from the show's original producer, Scott Dunlap, who moved from Los Angeles to Orange County and became fascinated by the conservative gated communities he was living amongst. He said that the men would leave for work and the women were left to run wild on the ranch, as they called it, playing golf, hanging out and shopping. They were all such unusual human beings. Entertaining, but also kind of annoying. After spending a few years there, he began to see different archetypes such as tennis bees, men of leisure, and boomerang kids as he identified them. Dunlap initially thought a short film would have been a great way to showcase the lifestyles of these people. However, he later decided that a reality show would have been a better format. This would have been likely due to the rapid rise in interest of reality TV at the time. The Real Housewives took inspiration from other reality shows such as The OC and Laguna Beach, as well as the widely popular comedy drama Desperate Housewives, with the latter being evident in the eventual casting of the show, featuring a friendship group of 5 women, with 4 being white women in their 40s and a longer, attractive Latina. By capitalizing on the hype of these popular shows, Bravo was able to create something familiar enough to entice the public to want to watch this new show, while simultaneously being different enough to bring something new to the table, ultimately creating a space for themselves which allowed them to have the longevity they would go on to have. Prior to the premiere of the show, the president of Bravo at the time, Lauri stated that Bravo continues to innovate in the reality TV genre with this riveting series exploring the complicated daily lives of 5 privileged women and their families. From Peyton Place to Desperate Housewives, viewers have been riveted by the fictionalized versions of such lifestyles on television. Now, here is a series that depicts real-life Desperate Housewives with an authentic look at their compelling day-to-day drama. During the early days of the development, the series was titled Behind the Gates. It would give us a behind-the-scenes look at one of the most prestigious neighborhoods in America, but the executives at the network believed that the title was too serious and in turn would not create enough interest in the show. That's when Lauren came up with the title we're familiar with today, The Real Housewives of Orange County. She thought that this was a lot lighter and more in line with the fun reality TV show that they had in mind. With this, she thought that it would also give them the opportunity to do other cities later down the line if the show was successful. However, at the time, Andy Cohen strongly opposed to the title, fearing that it sounded too awkward and thinking that they would never do another city. He would later laugh this off, stating how wrong they were when asked about it. Once the idea was in motion, Dunlap knew exactly who he thought would be a great fit for the show: Jeana Keough. He states, Jeana came from Hollywood. She was a Playboy Playmate of the Year. She was one of the muses in the ZZ Top's music videos, but she was now working as a real estate agent. Her husband, Matt Keough, was a retired baseball player. They were always gone, and their 3 children sort of roamed the streets of Costa di Casa wild. In 2005, he put together a short reel of footage to help him sell the show using the Keough family and one of the wives Jeana played tennis with, Kimberly Bryant, who was married to Scott Bryant, an executive at a Fortune 200 company. Andy Cohen, the head of production at Bravo at the time, loved what he saw when Scott showed him the reel he created, stating, "I watched and I couldn't believe how sexy and Californian everybody seemed, how big their boobs were, and how they spoke to their kids. I'm not sure we totally knew what it was, but I knew if it worked, it would be like a soap opera." By this point, the network seemed happy with the concept of the show and could see the potential that it had. So Bravo brought the show and insisted that they added more women to the cast, to which they responded by including Vicki Gunvalson, the successful self-made woman, Lauri, Vicki's insurance broker, and Joe De La Rosa, who had recently been engaged to Slade Smiley and new to the area. They joined Jeana Keough and Kimberly Bryant, and just like that, The Real Housewives of Orange County was officially in production. Despite the initial interest in the show, when filming began in 2005, the footage was actually described as disappointing, which led Bravo to be quite concerned with the future of the show. They were so concerned about the footage that they were ready to give up and shelve the show before it even had a chance to make it to the air. Andy later said, "The confessional interviews where the woman spoke straight to the camera weren't stylized, they weren't well lit, the women didn't look the best. The women also weren't going deeply into their emotions or being honest about what was happening with their friends." Thankfully, the producers on the show were persistent about the potential of The Real Housewives, insisting that they go back and shoot more footage at a cost of around $140,000. With the new footage, Bravo decided to take more control over filming. In doing so, they hired a new showrunner, David Ruppel, who had a background in soap operas and could prove useful in developing characters and story arcs. This allows for audiences to get a better sense of understanding when it comes to the women in the show and the stories they have to offer. This style of storytelling would be replicated for years to come throughout the different franchises as it proved successful. Ruppel stated that De La Rosa and Smiley came across as theatrical. He wanted them to work because Smiley was more attractive than the husbands of the other wives on the show, and De La Rosa brought a much needed sense of diversity. He realised that the best way to capture them was to keep the cameras rolling. This came after a phone call he received from one of his colleagues who was worried about how staged and phony a breakup scene between the two was coming across. As they continued filming that scene, things began to pick up. As Jo was drinking, she had a huge cocktail, and suddenly, the breakup became very real. Slade couldn't resist taking low blows at Jo, and she started getting mad, and it turned into a really emotional scene. After finally being able to iron out all the kinks, The Real Housewives of Orange County Season 1 finally made its debut in 2006. The show consisted of 7 episodes, with an additional 8th episode being added for the reunion special. Although the show was well received, it didn't become the huge hit they were looking for straight away. It heavily featured the women in their personal lives, with much of the drama coming from what was happening within their family life, as opposed to the drama with the other women. This didn't deter the network though, as Andy Cohen wanted a second season, especially after learning Jeana Keough and her husband were splitting up. He wanted to continue to follow their stories to see what would happen next with these women. Season 2 aired in 2007, with 4 of the 5 housewives from Season 1 returning to the franchise. Kimberly Bryant did not return to the series as a cast member and officially departed the show in the first episode of Season 2 after deciding to move to Chicago following a skin cancer scare. This led to our first Real Housewives newbie, Tammy Knickerbocker, a trend we would see throughout all franchises in the future as it would become common for cast members to leave, oftentimes resulting in mixed results, especially if it was a fan favourite who didn't return. Season 2 followed on from the first season as we continued to get to know the women we were previously introduced to, as well as getting to know the new housewife. The format pretty much remained the same, with the focus being on the women and their families as opposed to watching the dynamics within a friendship group. However, that wouldn't last very long, as by Season 3, we began to see a shift in the show. De La Rosa would depart the show following the split from Slade, and in her place came newbies now Tamra Judge, and Quinn Frey. Tamra is argued to be one of the biggest reasons for the shifts in the show as a whole. This shift was predominantly as a result of her blurting out whatever she had on her mind, creating conflicts with the other women on the show, leading to a lot of the drama being shifted away from the personal lives of the women to focusing on the dynamics between the relationships of the women. Although Tamra was known to rub some of her co-stars up the wrong way, those behind the camera were fond of her and what she was able to bring to the show. She was a born reality star, claimed Alex Baskin, the president of Evolution Media, the company that produces the series. It went from a sort of sleepy slice of life show with a bunch of suburban women getting together for trunk shows to a more aggressive, claws out show. There was no going back after this point. Dunlap agreed with the sentiment, going on to say, Tamra was the first one to voice an opinion about another housewife. Her words created conflict. Conflict matters. Conflict moves the story forward. We didn't know that until Tamra came on the show. Tamra's arrival on the series had officially ushered in a new era for the Real Housewives. This was highlighted in the reception from fans and in the ratings too. The premiere of Season 1 opened with 0.43 million viewers, while the Season 3 finale episode had over 2.39 million viewers. The incline in viewership was a clear indication that the increase in drama that had been brought to the show was sparking an interest within audiences, resembling the petty feuds as seen in shows such as The Hills. All low-stakes drama, but entertaining to audiences nonetheless. By placing the friendship at the forefront of the show, it would create a more entertaining dynamic, as the women would often hold each other accountable for things happening in their life they may be unwilling to discuss or share on camera. This led to some raw moments which allowed fans to connect with the women on a deeper level, as these things often resonated with viewers, as many would relate having gone through the same experience in the past or currently experiencing similar things. We will continue to see this friendship dynamic take the forefront of the franchise as a whole, with many iconic feuds happening as a result. From Nene Leakes vs Kim Zolciak to Danielle Stubb feuding with the entire cast of The Real Housewives of New Jersey, feuds between the main cast of women helped skyrocket the franchise into the mainstream, creating some of the most iconic moments in reality TV history. Before we get into my final thoughts about this topic, I briefly wanted to talk about Season 1 of The Real Housewives of Orange County. In doing this, I wanted to see how far we've come, as well as explore any notable differences in Season 1 in comparison to the modern Real Housewives shows. So what did I think of the show? I surprisingly enjoyed it. I went into it with the idea it was going to be unfamiliar, boring, and ultimately seem different to the modern Real Housewives shows, when in reality, I found the vibes not to be too different. There was an obvious difference in camera quality and editing styles, but that's no different to the franchises like New Jersey and Atlanta in their early seasons too, both of which have very strong early seasons. Another notable difference seemed to be the importance placed on wealth. Having a lot of money was at the forefront of the women's lives. This is seen with living in a gated community being referenced throughout the first season, and Lauri's main storyline is earning enough money to move back into the gated community that she once lived prior to her divorce. While the importance of lifestyle and glamour has fluctuated over the years, being more so prevalent on shows such as The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, which is how some of the wealthiest housewives of the franchise, it's taken a backseat to the drama overall. As when The Real Housewives of Orange County first premiered, shows like MTV Cribs and My Super Sweet 16 were popular at the time. Bragging about wealth and flaunting what you had seemed to be encouraged. Audiences seemingly loved it. But since its premiere, we've endured recessions and a cost of living crisis, which has meant audiences tend to dislike bragging about wealth, though still enjoy watching the lifestyle, which is why I feel like we don't see it as often in the present day. Something else which was interesting was the way the gated community was used as a way of bringing the women together. Even with Joe being new to the neighbourhood, they never shied away from acknowledging they weren't all friends prior to filming, and that instead they were unified by where they lived. Which is different to the present day housewives, as a lot of the time production wants us to believe that the newbies are close friends with at least one of the members of the cast, even if it's clear that they've recently met and have no history together. And finally, the reunion. Unlike what we're used to now, the show consisted of the women sitting in confessional style settings, addressing their storylines and how the time on the show changed their lives. They all got together in the end, minus Kimberly, who was on holiday, another thing we wouldn't see in present day, and discussed some of the group's antics, as well as continuing to discuss the changes in their lives that they've seen as a result of the show. One moment that stood out to me is that after the breakup between Joe and Slade in Season 1, it's revealed that Lauri had dated Slade during this period of time, and unlike what we're used to now, this wasn't played out for drama and in fact was barely addressed. When they did acknowledge that they had gotten together, it was almost swept under the rug, with it being discussed for less than a minute before the conversation switched to the focus of the importance of friendship, highlighting again how different the show's focus was at the time. So as we begin to conclude, I thought it was interesting for us to explore the journey the show would go through before the success it would go on to eventually have. This is a topic I haven't seen being discussed, and I thought it would be a fascinating story to explore. It was surprising to see that there was a point in time in which they even considered scrapping the series due to the network's lack of interest in the original footage of the show. It just goes to show that with the right team accompanied with the right cast, they would go on to be able to create magic. Starting in the early days of the reality TV boom, it was definitely a case of being in the right place at the right time, as we're able to ride the wave of reality TV, which had become a hot commodity, especially towards the late 2000s when the writers' strike took place. It meant there was an emphasis placed on reality shows by executives due to them not being affected by the strike. But that's all we've got time for today. Is there anything you've learned today that surprised you? Something that stood out about the origins of the franchise? If so, I would love to read it in the comment section below. For me personally, it was that Andy Cohen actually didn't come up with the original concept for The Real Housewives. Considering how synonymous he is now with the show, basically being the face of it and hosting all the reunions. But in that case, it would have highly been likely that Roni would have been the first show in the franchise, so I guess in hindsight it does make a lot of sense. So if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing for more content like this in the future. Until next time, bye everyone.